Okay. Well, welcome to week 7, everybody. I wish I hadn't covered up some of this picture, but the article I picked for today was talking about a mining site, a diamond mining site in northwestern Canada. It was actually really interesting. This picture on the bottom right, basically they're taking the waste, like this slurry from the mining, and they're packing it into these tubes, and they're running like air and water through it, and it's apparently the waste can suck up that. I'm explaining this like a mechanical engineer, not a chemical engineer. But the waste can like suck up this carbon dioxide, and it turns it into stone. It like crystallizes it, it solidifies it. Um, and that's already a thing that exists, but these guys are having a lot of success with it. And it was a really interesting article. I wrote down here one of these quotes at the bottom: the waste took up CO2 200 times faster than it did through natural weathering. I include that because also I had never thought about that natural rainfall um, will kind of allow for just like rock formations to take in that CO2. I thought it was really interesting. I definitely did not explain it very well because I know nothing about chemistry. But if anyone wants that, I can definitely send the link to it. So we have a pretty quick agenda, and then we're going to have a conversation with Harshta about sustainability on campus. But before that, we want to talk about our upcoming elections for next semester, our campus cleanup event, and we kind of wanted to hear from you guys' thoughts about doing a winter banquet this year. So for elections, we have 3 positions open, pretty much due to co-ops. So our vice president, our treasurer, and one of the 2 events coordinator positions will be open. I know we have Catherine here. Do you want to talk briefly about what your responsibilities are?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Yes, sure. So mainly, your focus is going to be on projects. So many of our projects will continue into the fall semester, but if a project closes this semester, you'll do research and determine the projects for the spring semester. That's a process that I can help you out with as we transition. And then making sure that all the project teams are on track, meeting their goals. If there are resources that they need, you kind of are an encyclopedia for the projects. And providing Sarah with backup when needed, going to additional meetings, and that's the very quick summary of what I do.
Our treasurer is not here, but to sum it up, it's essentially keeping track of our budget from semester to semester, understanding the club system and what our requirements are within that. On the project side, it'll be filling out EIFs so you guys can purchase stuff. It's pretty much it for treasure. It's a lot to learn, but once you know it, it sticks to that. John, do you want to talk about what an event coordinator does?
Yeah, I can do that. So it's kind of in the name, event coordinator. So we plan events. I am currently planning or helping to plan the campus cleanup. We plan events. Job one. What's it called? Networking. There we go. Networking event. If we decide to have a winter banquet, I'll also help planning that. Event coordinator is probably the least involved of the positions. So if you want to get a feel for how eBoard is and stuff, event coordinator is probably the best bet. But it's still decently involved. Mostly just a bunch of emails, the occasional phone call to people for planning stuff. But other than that, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I definitely agree that events coordinator is probably the easiest one to transition into. Although I know we have a couple new people to the club here. I don't want to dissuade you from applying for any of these, nominating yourself for any of these positions. It's definitely it's definitely attainable to jump into some of these, and we definitely have your back to learn what you need to. Um, so the timeline of this is going to be nominations will be open tonight, and those will go until next Tuesday after the meeting. And then the nominated people will have a week to prepare a presentation, and week 9's general meeting is going to be sharing those presentations. And then by week 10, we should have our elected e-board for the spring. So if you have any other questions about that, please ask me on Slack. So we're planning now, John mentioned it, our campus cleanup event. That's going to be Saturday, October 10th. We don't have a definite start time right now. I'm going to say 10 a.m. for now. And we're probably going to be in one of these areas circled in red. I know we have a couple in mind yet, but I don't think we have a we haven't picked one for sure yet. It's really because of planning with facilities. But yeah, so I'm just kind of putting that on your radar now. We're going to mention it next week, and then it's the Saturday after that. So the winter banquet, where eBoard is in the process right now of trying to decide if we want to do this, and we want to make sure that you guys are interested in something like this. So we're thinking end of week 12, November 7th. So a couple weeks before finals, not right at the end of the semester. It's about the same time it normally is. We're thinking keep it virtual, make it 1 to 2 hours. Normally it would be a project expo and speakers. We obviously can't really do a project expo. So we're thinking one speaker and some kind of collaborative activity. An example of that would be if you've ever been to the ESW conference or this past RegCon, we do like an environmental hackathon. So that's an idea of what that activity might be. Because we're not huge right now, this is going to be open to RIT ESW as well as the whole RIT sustainability community. And we're going to open it up to other ESW chapters, probably in New York, so we can make it relevant to them specifically. So we're kind of just interested what you guys think. Does that seem like something you'd be interested in? Does the time frame of that 1 to 2 hours on a Saturday make sense? So this is, floor is open to you guys.
I like the idea of it. I think it'd be cool to talk to other people, especially sustainability matters, and also a nice kind of break, but also I guess like have a casual but kind of connected meeting with other people. Yeah, I'm down.
Awesome. Does anyone else have thoughts on that event? I feel like you guys would be the most likely to go because you guys have all been consistently coming to our general meetings, which we really appreciate. So maybe this is kind of on the fly, but if you guys mention this in project groups, I know Jimmy, you've got a big project group. Maybe mention this, see if they'd be interested in participating in something like this.
Yes, ma'am.
We really want to focus on making this something that you guys want, because we don't want to put all this work into a really big event that nobody wants to attend. So that's really why we're asking. Okay, that's not for you to see. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. So the rest of this meeting is really for a conversation. We've invited Harshita here, who is, I don't actually know your official position within RIT Sustainability.
It's the assistant director for campus sustainability, which I don't really know what that means, but my team and I oversee RIT's sustainability efforts. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I asked Harshita to come in today to talk about really what sustainability efforts are happening on campus, and specifically I was kind of curious about how things have changed during COVID and what accommodations need to be made, and I kind of wanted this to be like a conversation rather than just like a presentation. So
Great. I love the sound of that. I have slides that I'm happy to share depending on if anything pops up that I'm like, I have a slide to show you. That's when I'll pull it out. So I have things ready to go, but I won't bore you with a PowerPoint quite yet. So I guess I'll just jump in. My name is Harshita. I've been on campus in my role for about 2.5 years now. And in that time, our department has changed a lot. We started off back in 2011. It was a one-person team. Enid Cardinal, who many of you might have met or heard about. She was hired because RIT then president, Dr. Dessler, was looking at a climate commitment. So he wanted us to sign on to the higher ed institution's president's climate commitment to help RIT figure out a plan for climate action. Specifically, when do we want to become carbon neutral by, and who will oversee all of that? And there was enough push to establish a position that was unique, that it wasn't housed within academic affairs or facilities or FNA or any one department. So this position, it's always reported directly to the president. And for about 7 years, she was a one-person team until 2018, when she got approval to hire a second person, because we realized that just her and a whole bunch of students wasn't really enough to oversee everything that we were doing. So our program grew significantly. Goodbye Goodbye was established. The food share program was established. Climate action plan was created. Partnerships with dining happened. So a lot was happening, and it was time that another person came in to oversee part of, a lot, the work that was done by this department. That's when I came on board. About a year into that, our team reorganized, and Enid took over strategic planning for the entire institution. So she is now the senior advisor to President Munson for strategic planning and sustainability, which is a mouthful. And strategic planning is a big role, right? Setting the strategic plan for the institution for many years out, working closely with the Board of Trustees, working with student government, staff council, academic senate, and so on. Luckily for us, we had another person join our team, Lori Hendren. And so now we're a 3-person team. So it feels like we've grown, but really we've also grown, the scope of our work has grown. And when COVID hit, Enid had to switch to doing COVID basically full time. There was a gap in the president's office where we didn't have a designated person for crisis management from a proactive approach. We have somebody who does that from a reactive approach. That's risk management is part of that team, but really coordinating response and thinking about how do we depopulate campus? How do we bring people back for spring? How do we determine room capacity, all kinds of stuff that Enid then took over. So when that shift happened, she kind of handed off all of sustainability to me, and we're both working full time and then some, and she's doing COVID, I'm doing sustainability. For the most part, it's working out. And as far as sustainability goes, so a lot of my time is spent right now on, we have a student team, so I'm trying to get everyone up to speed. We have a student recycling coordinator who oversees our waste management, messaging and branding and all of that. and also e-waste collection, so data entry and things like that. I teach a wellness class, Sustainable Living 101. We're doing that again next semester. This other class that I teach is Momentum 2, which is based on the Sustainable Development Goals and helps students kind of connect their leadership skills and passions with sustainability. And then, what else? We do all of our reporting for sustainability, and every few years we have to submit this giant report that takes weeks to work on, and that's due next semester, so the timing could not be better. So we're working on that right now. And I'm really focused on what do we need to do to be, again, like this proactive versus reactive approach to sustainability, right? Unfortunately, the way sustainability has been approached over time is more like, oh crap, we're in trouble because the sea levels are rising. And it's not until we start to feel the effects of problems that we decide to treat them. By then, the way it ends up working is oftentimes we're treating the symptoms of the problem and not the root cause. Which is not to say that symptoms don't need to be treated. They absolutely do, right? But while we are thinking about, okay, here is a flooding event that happened in a community, yes, it's important to get people out of harm's way. But it's also important to think about, how do we prevent this from happening in the future, right? And so that's the lens that I look at sustainability from. Is like, let's be proactive so we don't have oh crap moments, or the ones that we do have are fewer and more manageable, right? And so from that viewpoint, the big thing that I personally am really interested in right now is the climate action plan. It's 2020. Our goal is to be carbon neutral by 2030. And the window of time to really address carbon emissions globally is closing. We have our emissions divided into scope 1, 2, and 3. And that's things like, scope 1 is more like direct emissions, things like buildings and all of that. Scope 3 is a tricky one, things like commuting. So we can't really we don't have a good calculation for, who's commuting to campus and who is emitting how much carbon in that process and so on. Our climate action plan is available online. Let me see if I can find a link and I will post it in the chat. Things that I could use help with. So a lot of my time is spent on waste management, and recycling, honestly, this might come out wrong, but it's the bane of my existence. Personally, I think of recycling as a cop-out. I think over time, our society has been taught that, hey, it's okay to generate waste as long as you're recycling it, right? But the saying goes, reduce, reuse, recycle, and it really should be done in that order. And so we have been struggling globally, but also on our campus with people not knowing how to recycle. The industry has changed a lot in the last 3 years alone. So I get where the confusion is coming from. But I think, again, like teaching people how to recycle properly is treating the symptom. Teaching people to reduce consumption would be treating the problem. But the way our industry works, the way brands market themselves, the way the economy is even situated, this idea that, when the stock market is high or when people are buying more, the consumerism is what drives certain indicators that suggest that the economy is doing well. And that system is what is, broken essentially. So how do we reverse that? How do we reverse engineer people's thinking or their way of thinking from how do we move from a consumer or a consumption-based economy to something that is more sustainable? So those are kind of some of the challenges that I think about. And the best way to make change at the systems level is through education. Is by, talking to you all, talking to the leaders of tomorrow. But I also know that we are, that doesn't make it not my responsibility that, I'm teaching people how to do this work, right? So we are also trying to look at like what it is that we as individuals and as a department can do to kind of be role models for all the change that needs to happen. So with that background, that was kind of quick. I would love for you to ask me anything about sustainability. We can have a candid conversation. So what are things that you're excited about, passionate about, concerned about, and how can we make that happen? While you do that, I will look up the website for the climate action plan. So I will pause there.
I was just going to ask you, just based off, am I echoing or was someone else talking?
I'm going to mute myself. I think that might be.
Okay. I was going to ask, just based off of what you mentioned, there's something that came to mind with minimizing recycling and instead promoting reusing. Have you guys had any influence or any attempt at influencing events on campus with all these like free giveaway items and career fair and new student orientation? I know is a big one. Curious if you guys have had any attempts at minimizing the waste of those events.
That is a great question. So the short answer is not really. We've talked about it. The way RIT works is that every department has a little budget, and they can do whatever they want with that money to a degree. And whatever they want to give students as giveaways, or for if it's marketing reason, or if it's like, you know, as a way for people to come to their events. I always look at it as, if you have to entice people with things, is that event really worth having? That argument, people don't like that argument, so I get that. But there was a survey done by Student Government about 2 years ago that was asking students what kind of giveaways would be meaningful to you. And I think the research shows that students would rather have things that are useful, or have things that are, like an experience, like a one and done kind of thing, rather than a stress ball. Most stress balls, or most items that are made cheaply, even t-shirts for that matter, are often recycled, or they end up at places like Goodwill, or they're tossed in the landfill, right? And it's a waste of tuition dollars, and it's also just not sustainable. There's nothing good that really comes out of it. Now, instead, if students were given as incentives things like, here's a Ben & Jerry's coupon, or here's a Java's token, you do get this feeling of, all right, I got something useful out of this, and let me go and use it, and then I'm done with it. So it reduces waste, first of all. Two, it's a one-time transactional thing. So nobody has to worry about like taking something to the landfill. And if you lose it, it's not the biggest deal, right? It's like maybe it could be, you know, departments could save money also by thinking about, all right, for every time that it's used, you will bill us or something like that. I don't know. There are ways around it. Other things include, and this is tricky right now with COVID, but coupon to the Red Barn for a rock climbing session, or a free skate rental, things like that. Things that are more experience-based rather than. There is a waste hierarchy. Let me send that to you as well. So I will say the easiest way to make a change is, as a student, is through paw prints. Sarah and Catherine, you've been on the SG Sustainability Committee meetings recently. And I, you know, every week we look at what petitions are there. There are some that I'm just like, oh my gosh, no, please, this doesn't need to happen. But then there are some things that would actually be meaningful. So a petition that says something like, let's develop standards around ethics and purchasing and giveaways. That, hey, we don't want random things. Especially if we can get 200 signatures, that would be an interesting way to create policy change. In fact, right now, the hub doesn't have any standards for where their t-shirts come from, or having to use recycled paper. like 100% recycled content paper. And a lot of the t-shirts in particular, departments will go with the cheapest option they can get. And more often than not, it's cheaply made clothing. And the reason it's inexpensive is because the people making it were not compensated right. They weren't given fair wages. They probably had poor working conditions. And the fast fashion industry, like there's a whole lot of research out there that says that it really caused a lot of harm to the environment and to people and communities. So we should be thinking about, can we introduce actual fair labor standards in the purchasing decisions that are made at RIT?
That's actually really interesting that you mentioned the hub, because I know for clubs, that's one of the resources that the club office asks you to go to first. They ask you to go to the hub and look at their pricing, and there's some rules about whether if you like choose not to use them, but that's really interesting.
Yeah, there are no standards. It makes me so upset because it's like, how can we talk about trying to create change and do better when we can't even, live our values here? Let me share this quick graphic while I'm thinking about it. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
So this is oops. Okay. Stop. What is, hang on one second. So this was a PowerPoint that I did for staff council called Trash Talk. So how much trash we generate and where does our stuff go? It was funny because when I was like, ask me anything, it was like a higher level of conversation. And the things I got was, well, the recycling hasn't been picked up in this location. And I'm like, really? That's your question? But okay, let's talk about that. Noted. But anyway, so Trash Talk. This map, like when I first saw it, my mind was really blown. Like this whole marketing thing, I talk about it a lot, but this was the first time I was actually looking at data. So I don't know if you could see this. I'm gonna try to make it. So back in the 60s, we produced 100 million tons of stuff, most of it, or of waste. Basically all of it was going to the landfill. And then that's around the time that we're like, okay, let's start looking at recycling. Let's start looking at other options. So composting was slow in being implemented, and then combustion with energy recovery. So basically, let's burn our waste and try to recover some of that energy. It's greenwashing. Honestly, if we want to be honest about what that is, like even recycling is a way to greenwash. So over time, in the last, 60 years, we have almost tripled how much waste we generate. And I know that the population has grown, but this is just in America. We've tripled how much waste we generate, and we feel good about ourselves because a fraction of that is recycled, and a fraction of that is combusted to produce energy. And some of it is compost, but not nearly enough. And of course, the amount that we send in the landfill, it's increased overall, but that curve has flattened. So we're like, it's no big deal. But eventually the space will run out, and nobody wants landfills in their backyard, right? And eventually, someday, decades, maybe centuries from now, we're gonna have to open that up and see what it is that we tossed in there. And a lot of it is toxic waste. It's a disaster waiting to happen. So like, how do we reverse that? How do we reduce consumption in a consumption-driven economy? And how do we really solve the problem of waste? And the best way to do it is by not consuming as much, but that's not a very popular argument. Here's our waste management hierarchies, like source reduction and reuse is the best option, composting, recycling, energy recovery. And I will say composting, there are ways to compost that also generate energy. So that's another option. So this is kind of, depending on the situation, these could be reversed. And then treatment and disposal is the least preferred option. The rest of it, this is, things that RIT does recycle from like a source, or from where this is like pre-consumer kind of waste. So construction and demolition, it doesn't actually go to the consumer, and it's kind of the waste wherever it is produced. It's shipped away for recycling right on site. When I say paper, there are two streams. There's one that's the mixed recycling stream, but then there's also paper that we just send from larger print operations for recycling directly to make sure that it's really like not contaminated. The rest of it, we do a little bit, but we could be a little bit better about all of it. And from a numbers perspective, we've had some waste hauling challenges with our vendors changing and stuff. So there are changes that have been happening over the last year or so that are being affected even by COVID now. So
So you talked about us not being great at recycling on campus. How much of is our recycling like in its entirety right now going to landfill? And is that primarily because people are just not good at recycling?
So it's not going to the landfill in its entirety. So things like paper from a print lab, those will be recycled. So any recycling stream that is not contaminated, we're okay with. But a lot of the times, waste from the residence halls, waste from the dining buildings, and waste from even office buildings, if they're not, any stream that's contaminated will not be recycled. And so it's really hard to tell which streams those are right now. So I will say that residence halls streams are generally pretty contaminated. And then anywhere where there's a dining facility where people don't have to rinse their takeout container, or they don't have the option to rinse their takeout container and just toss it. No matter where you toss it, it will go into the landfill. It's almost worse to recycle improperly than to just throw it in the landfill stream. So it's one of those things where people do what we call wish cycling. It's like, oh, I'm gonna put this in the recycling bin and hope that it gets recycled. But the new saying, unfortunately, is when in doubt, throw it out. So yeah, our recycling website is really good. The FAQ section, there are people from the community who look at it and they're like, thank you, this is more helpful than even the county website. And I'm like, yay.
Would you say that the top contaminator is food on campus of recycling?
I believe so. And this is just anecdotal evidence. It's when food isn't rinsed out of containers properly before it's recycled.
I was actually going to ask about that as well, because at least, I don't know if anyone here was a part of that, but at least, was it last year, the previous year's waste audit that ESW did, and then we joined with RT Sustainability and worked on, we saw that the biggest thing was definitely those plastic clamshell containers. And I think one reason for that might be you can go to the bathroom down the hall to wash that out, but I wonder if we could have like a closer, or I don't know if you guys have thought about this already, but a closer source of rinsing it out or quickly cleaning those containers out.
So we've been thinking about that, and I know that in a lot of the newer buildings, there are better standards for things like kitchen, sinks and kitchens and stuff that could be used. So for example, the sustainability building has a few options for sinks, so you don't have to go as far as the bathroom to rinse. But it's hard to retrofit, and that is sometimes more expensive. So the cost benefit needs to be weighed quite a bit. And I think, you asked what has changed because of COVID, and I will say that's the biggest thing, is that we've seen a spike in single-use everything, containers, cutlery, all of that has really blown up in the last several weeks. And, when we were weighing public health with sustainability, I think, there's no, public health comes first, right? Health is important. We can do anything without ensuring that our campus community is safe. And right now, COVID is a threat. We want to be safe from it. So we've talked to our dining partners, and they've said that, hey, once this is over, we need to redouble our efforts to bring back the OZ system, to bring back reusables and really push them. So right now, all we can do is convince people that, hey, bring your own cutlery when you're eating on campus. I have some extras that are RIT sustainability branded. If anybody would like one, come see me. But we're trying to convince people to have that, make that behavior change on their own. So I always bring my cutlery when I go eat on campus. So ultimately all that's doing is making me feel a little bit good about myself, because I'm still eating in a container that is disposable, right? But I get it, it's the only choice we have right now. But once we come back, I'm really gonna try to put, once we come, our in a post-COVID world, I'm going to do everything I can to really push for OZ and reusable plates in China to be used all over campus if possible. And that's the kind of thing that if student government and all of you students could help with, that would be amazing. We'll need that. Composting is something that I've been trying to push for, and we need to have that happen by next year because of a law that this new food scraps law. So those, I think purchasing and composting are the two things that if students, if you feel strongly about it, make it known to student government. Eli, I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
Oh no, it's all good. I just had a question. Do you know what like a near zero waste economic model would look like, and what a small version of that would look like at RIT? It's kind of a broad question.
So a circular economy, is that kind of what you're?
Yeah, I guess.
So I don't know if there are examples that I could say of circular economies that actually work. I think there are products that you can have a closed loop for, so cradle to cradle approach. To me, a zero waste economy really focuses a lot on reusables whenever possible, and then diverting 100% of the waste from the landfill. So whether that's recycling products or if it's I mean, honestly, it's like reusing many times until you have to dispose of it. And when you're at the point of, okay, we need to get rid of it, repurposing it. So like melting down plastic and creating something new, or glass, or anything like that, any materials that can truly be recycled, or composting. And so you have to start with that in mind. You have to start with like the end of life process in mind when you're creating the product. Does that make sense? Does that even answer your question?
Yeah. It's.
And then I also think about it from a justice perspective, that, you know, people need to be compensated properly for the products that they're creating. Then the other things, you know, that we can, that can easily be wasted are energy and water. And so when you're thinking about recycling products, we also need to keep in mind that where is the energy coming from that is used to recycle that or go through the end of life processes for that product. And if it's coming from a reusable or renewable source like solar or wind, that's okay. But if you need to use fossil fuels, well, then that has a larger carbon footprint, a larger water footprint, and all of that as well. I will look for examples of like truly circular economies, but I honestly can't really think of any in the modern day right now, but I'll do some research.
Do you want to talk about maybe maybe the next year or so, and maybe the ideal state of what RIT could do with respect to composting?
Yes. So we have identified ways to get composting on campus. So where the solar array is, do you guys know where it is on RIT's campus? It's kind of behind, it's hidden away. We're not really, it's one of those things that where no one can really be allowed to go there for lots of reasons. But right in that area, there's a giant open field where all that's really happening right now is FMS is bringing things like tree clippings and dumping it there. So we have a lot of carbon there. When you're working on a composting operation, you need to have carbon, you need to have nitrogen. Well, nitrogen can come from all the food waste or food scraps that the dining halls produce. And so we have all the raw material that we need. All we need is a static pile system, and then we need a process for bringing these compostable items to this place and then making sure that it works. So realistically, we need to have this launched by summer to pilot it, and then slowly the hope is that we will expand. So we'll start with just the very basics in the dining halls, pre-consumer as well as post-consumer waste, bringing it over there and seeing if it works. And if it does, which I'm pretty sure it will, because it's not that hard to compost. Over time, I will also want to open it up to have maybe a system where, so what I do right now is I do composting through community compost. So I get a bucket and I pay $4 per bucket. So every time I buy a new bucket, so when I'm done, I return that bucket and so on. So if we could have a system like that on campus where it doesn't even have to be $4, it could be $2 or $3 for faculty, staff. And I would honestly make it free for students, because the easier you make it for students, the more likely they are to actually do it. If students have to pay for composting, that just seems not right, and it just seems not helpful. But faculty, staff, absolutely. I think we can. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So that's kind of the system that I have in mind. So over time, we want to be able to accept food waste from individuals as well. And then the other thing is, and this will, our permitting thing will vary depending on if we're just doing an in-house composting operation versus, so if we could become a composting facility that accepts waste from other places like RGH. But then we're now like a commercial composting provider, right? So that's tricky. So we want to start just in-house, see if it works, and it's a lot easier to get the permits for that. But I was talking to Ina today. I'm like, Ina, please promise me that by the end of the semester, we will have the permissions that we need to get going on composting, because otherwise we'll be in trouble. So.
You mentioned the type of composting system earlier where you can kind of recall some of that energy. Is that a potential thing, or is this kind of on maybe too big of a scale to do something like that?
To capture energy?
Yeah.
Composting. So this system, it wouldn't quite work that way, because it would be a giant aerated static pile. Here, let me show you. I don't have the whole design, but there are some, there's like there's some like 2-minute videos on YouTube to explain what it is, but it's an open air system in this case. So it'd be really hard to recapture that energy. And aerated static piles are cheaper. They're much cheaper. They're simple. They don't really need energy to work. The problem with a lot of digesters that we do have on campus right now is that most of them actually use energy to create the compost. It happens faster, which is great, but we don't really need it to happen fast. What we need is something that's inexpensive right now. So as far as capturing energy or generating energy, I don't think it would be feasible with this system. Mm-hmm. But I will, disclaimer, I'm not an engineer, so I was actually
going to suggest, if you haven't if you haven't, if you're not already thinking about this, maybe reach out to like KGCOE's like MSD program. Maybe you could get some student help on that. I mean, that sounds like something I would love to work on as an MSD project.
Yeah, that would be nice.
That'd be really cool.
And then Dave Bro, he's the farm manager. He is working on this property over in Penfield that we acquired last year. Well, acquired, we were gifted it. So if he has any projects, I will gladly reach out to ESW, but also to MSD to see if there is a possibility for.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, the only reason I mentioned MSD instead of ESW is if you're trying to get it on like a fast timeline and that's a more intense, very scheduled class. But yeah, ESW would absolutely be the perfect place for those as well.
Sounds good. I think I will share, and I know this is being recorded, but we'll just pretend like it's off the record. But sometimes the way we work at RIT's facilities, when they need to do a project, they need to do it fast. And even things like the shipping farm, the freight farm that you have on campus, like I look at those and I'm like, why don't we get students to work on something like this? Like I know professors and I know students who would love to set up an aquaponics system from scratch, right? The problem is that sometimes it takes time, and when we need something, we want it as soon as possible, which is where the reactive versus proactive mindset comes to mind for me. Is like, if only we were proactive about this, we could spend 2 years and have students do it the right way and have faculty members do things the right way. But more often than not, we realize, oh, it's too late, we need this now. And so we're just gonna pay someone, an outside entity, to do it. And that's just such a shame for a higher ed institution. It just seems so wasteful. So that's my little personal rant. Trying to change.
Yeah. You already kind of covered this with paw prints, but I did want to ask, what is the most impactful thing that we can do as students?
So I will say, if you're going to do a paw prints petition, make sure that you market it to get students to actually sign it. Because until it reaches the 200 signatures mark, it's hard to, I know it will still get looked at, but the more signatures that something gets, the more likely it is to make it to the administration, so beyond student government. So that would be something that I would do. And then the other thing is, you're all here because you're brilliant and your tuition dollars help run this institution. So if you feel like there's something you feel strongly about, like talk to people, come talk to me, and then we can like connect you with the right people on campus and resources to make things happen. So yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
I had a very general question, just out of curiosity, and it's not really sustainability related, but I mean, you guys have made great strides in the past few years. Do you have a favorite program that RIT Sustainability has kind of pushed through?
Favorite program? I have a few, but I would say Momentum 2 is one of my favorite programs because it really focuses on the global goals. We have like in-depth, often difficult conversations that revolve around, things other than recycling and energy, and those things are important, but also like how does it affect people? It's not just how to create the cleanest energy possible, but also how do you make it affordable and distribute it to the people in need. So it really focuses on interdisciplinary approaches. And then the other thing I will say is Goodbye, Goodbye. I think that's it's such a great success story, and it's so powerful because it's exhausting. But at the end of the program, you see the results in person. It's like right in front of you, all the weights, the stuff that you prevented from ending up in the landfill, perfectly useful stuff, right? So the impact of that is highly visible. And it's completely student run. So I'm always inspired by all of the students that help make that happen. And that's how I met a lot of former ESW students. So Bree Gould, Kiera Higgins and I get coffee or beverages every month or so and just chat. And so all of them, I even started off as a Goodbye volunteer the first year of the program. And so it's really inspiring to work with students, and we have a lot of fun as well. I'm really hoping that we can make it work for next year. If there isn't a vaccine by then, which chances are they won't be. And I'm not one to rush scientific processes, because that's when things go wrong. But on the off chance that we have a vaccine, great. If we don't, it will be harder, but I want to kind of figure out safe ways to make Goodbye happen. So if any of you are interested, these are paid positions for students on Goodbye. So if you're interested and available to take on a project, we would love to have you. So, yeah.
I think I want to call it here because we're at 7:56. But thank you so much for coming in and talking to us. I always learn so much every time we talk about sustainability on campus or just generally. But yeah, thank you so much for coming to talk to us.
Well, please reach out. And we used to do these fair trade coffee hours every now and then, the first Friday of every month. We've stopped doing that because of COVID. But given the way things are right now, I feel like there's a possibility that something like that could be brought back. So if anybody just wants to have a casual conversation in a small, socially distant group, I'd be happy to do that. And our office is one of the I don't advertise it very much, but I know dining can't really give you coffee in your reusable mug. But come over to our office, which is on the third floor of the sustainability building, and we have coffee all day, every day. And you can bring your own mug, or you can use one of our reusable mugs, and it'll be a party. So, yeah.
Also, if anyone is interested, Harshita mentioned that Catherine and I both go to the sustainability committee meetings, which is Monday at noon. And she mentioned we talk about paw prints, we talk about upcoming sustainability events on campus. Hopefully we're going to have more clubs representing, just so we can kind of communicate within a larger sustainability community on campus. So if anyone is interested, and you don't have to go religiously to those meetings, if you want to pop in for one, let me know. I can definitely send you the Zoom link to that. So
It is Monday at 1. E-board's at noon.
oops. Yeah, don't go at noon. Thank you.
All right. Well,
All
enjoy
right.
the evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'll see you again.
Yeah,
Hopefully,
thank you.
take care. And my email is in the chat if you want to connect. So
I'm also going to send it in the Slack after this meeting. So
thanks, Sarah. All right. Bye, everyone.
awesome.
Hi, thank you again.